another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to The Dark Crystal Minute.
And begin, all the same. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
And now once more the world must undergo a time of testing.
It is time to return to the castle.
There is much to be learned, and you have no time.
And here's your hosts, Philip Mitchell and Jamie Prater. Hello and welcome to the Dark Crystal Minute. This is your minute-by-minute discussion on the cult classic film, The Dark Crystal. I'm your host, Philip Mitchell, and I'm the host of other Dark Crystal podcasts as Trial by Stone, as well as The Gathering Songs, as well as Blade Runner Minute with Jamie.
And I'm your host, J.M. Prater, and I am host of and founder of Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast, Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast, and the Blade Runner Minute with my co-host, Philip Mitchell.
Yeah, absolutely. As we sort of, continue doing these minute-by-minute shows with Blade Runner, but also with Dark Crystal together, so it's always a lot of fun. But yeah, so we are up to minute 17 of the Dark Crystal Minute. That's from minute 16 to 17. And to sort of recap what happens in this minute, of course, the Trial by Stone sort of begins. The swords, they raise up. And as we see the Gartha Master and the Emperor sort of walking towards the big rock, as they're about to grab their swords, they scream, they clash their swords together to commence the Trial by Stone. And as sort of, they're sort of taunting each other. And it sort of ends with the Gartha Master as he's about to make his first move. So, which is sort of what happens in this minute of the Dark Crystal Minute. And yeah, it just makes me think about like whether they've had all these sort of contests, in the past with the Trial by Stone. Because you can see like with the Rock that it seems to be chopped, quite a feut times. It would actually be something that would be cool if in the Age of Resistance, if they actually use that, that it used to be a much bigger rock and then it just got chipped down every time. And with arguments back and forth between the Skeksis. Yeah, it just made me thought about that, yeah. Again, this is where we really sort of get the score for, with the Dark Crystal, that orchestral from Trevor Jones, in full power, which, it's just one of my sort of favorite sort of soundtracks, of course, but it's such a great theme, with the Dark Crystal. I actually want to know, your thoughts about this minute, Jamie.
Yeah, well, it's, again, another really rich minute full of a lot of action, and we really see the Skeksis in kind of full character, and they're these backbiting, vengeful, power-hungry things, and we really see this playing out. So it's a very intense minute, and there, again, a lot of stuff going on. I tend to continue to wonder about the puppetry of it, and you see these Skeksis characters pick up these swords, and they're very, very, very large swords. So the puppeteers have to pull off that these characters are picking these swords up effortlessly because they're, they should. And it really happens. It's a really, again, amazing scene. I'm just looking at all the detail on the swords themselves, on the actual stone, the thing that encases the stone below it. It looks like this elaborate, I can't even describe what that is, but the stone is being held up by this thing. It's really beautiful. It's very terrifying. Again, these gaudy, overly dramatic Skeksis, kind of living in this and wanting to be ruler of, the other 8 or the other 7 Skeksis now because the Emperor is dead. So it's just a great scene, and I enjoy it every time I see it.
Yeah, me too. And just again with incredible detail. And this is something you mentioned to me, I think, before we start recording, that was actually a bit of a surprise that you actually see something sort of underneath the Chamberlain. I think that was present. I think in the wide shot when we see the the Gartham Master and the Chamberlain as they bring their swords back. You mentioned that you can actually see like a gold rod sort of underneath the Chamberlain's clothes just for a brief second or two. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, there's probably only other one, for myself at least, there's one other moment where I've seen something that maybe I shouldn't have seen in the Dark Crystal. And so when you see, like, I don't know if this is available, like I'm watching this on my computer as I think you are, Philip. So on your television screen, even the one, you know, our TV screens these days, or our whatever, it's 4K or whatever, they're all formatted to be longer because that's how films are made. That's the aspect ratio that the films are made in. So I don't even know if you can see this when you're watching the film, but when you watch it on your computer, it's just giving us a little bit more of that frame to see what they've cut off underneath it. So it's just kind of a look into. Actually, the funny thing is, it doesn't throw me off. It doesn't jar me. You really can't tell what it is because it is gold. So, but it's just one of those things that it's just kind of showing you how the sword was heavy, and these puppets obviously couldn't pick up this sword, so they needed another puppeteer.
I think that's the interesting, sort of the origins with the Skeksis. I had a quick look in the Dark Crystal Ultimate Visual History, and I mean, originally they were sort of considered to be, they were going to be done as sort of hand puppets, so just slightly larger than the Gelflings, like in scale. But I think what happened was sort of after they were doing all the tests, especially with the Mystics and how big, you know, the Mystics were, you know, with the scale, that it sort of at the end sort of made a bit more sense for the Skeksis to be, you know, that very large scale puppetry that they were, you know, to pull through with the Skeksis. And I mean, I just love, again, like with the wide shot, you can actually see like the Podling just like holding one of the staffs in the background.
Yes.
And that,
yes,
so
I
it's
love
like,
that shot.
and that's the thing about, you know, doing these things, you know, we're looking at it minute by minute and just noticing all these, you know, things that we just didn't really think about. It's just, you know, just adds a bit more detail. You know, it's something that you wouldn't think that you would bother to put in a film, you know, that detail, because it's like, you just don't think about it. But it's cool that they sort of thought about all these things like that. Yeah.
And that's, again, really shows the richness of this world, the level of detail. Like I'm looking right now at the wall behind what's kind of going on, and you see that stone wall or the faux stone or whatever, however it is that they made it. And then there's this elaborate like proscenium, I suppose, which you would call that, behind it. And I don't know if this was a special set built for this scene or they just used the crystal room, and they use a portion of that for the scene. I'm not really sure how they made this, but the level of detail in this shot is incredible. The kind of work that took to make this world seem viable and authentic. And this is really how you make, this is world building. This is how you make worlds believable. And I think about some of my favorite films like Alien, Blade Runner 2049, all of these films that they spare no expense on the level of detail, and you can just see it everywhere, not just in the puppets, not just in, you know, some of the props, but every square inch of this frame is incredible.
Just the amount of work that they did to bring, you know, all these, you know, these creatures to life with the Skeksis. You know, even just seeing like I'm just looking one frame, there's one shot, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, like all the Skeksis. You know, it's crazy, yeah. And I think they'll probably wrap up for this episode of the Dark Crystal Minute as we keep, you know, moving forward, you know, as we get to more minutes, as they sort of continue on with the Trial by Stone challenge between the Gartham Master and the Chamberlain. So I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Dark Crystal Minute. If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. You can check us out on Twitter at darkcrystalpod. We're also on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast. And if you can give us a review on Facebook or on iTunes, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your time, and come back next time for more The Dark Crystal Minute.